Questions 5, 6, and 7 are all asking the same thing, but just about different places. We know that the graph that we made was about Greece, New York, the number of hours in Greece, New York. But what if we changed the location? What if we did Anchorage, Alaska, Sydney, Australia in the southern hemisphere, right along the equator in Quito, Ecuador? How would that graph look different? Let's take a look and see if we can figure this out. We said that this line here, which is about 43 degrees north, represents where we live in Greece, New York. And we've got about 15 hours of sunlight and 9 hours of darkness. And then 6 months later, we're going to get the opposite, 15 hours of darkness and about 9 hours of daylight on the wintertime, and in the summertime, a lot more. How would this look any different if we went somewhere else? Well, we see that, yeah, we've got a lot more daylight in the summer in Greece, New York, and less daylight in the wintertime. Is this also true for these other locations as well? Anchorage, Alaska is 61 degrees north of the equator. So there's Anchorage, Alaska at that line. Take a look as the Earth spins around, how much time Anchorage, Alaska gets to spend in the daylight on this day. And look at just that little tiny bit of darkness. 6 months later, of course, it switches. They get a tremendous amount of darkness and only a tiny little bit of daylight. What about Sydney, Australia? How is that going to look different? Sydney, Australia is 34 degrees south of the equator. So that line for Sydney, Australia is going to be about this point right here, 34 degrees south of the equator. And notice on this day, when we here in Greece, New York have a lot of sunlight and a little bit of darkness, they have a lot of darkness. There's a lot more darkness in Sydney and just a little bit of light. 6 months later, though, in Sydney, they're getting more light and less darkness. So when Sydney gets a lot of light is when we just get a little bit of light. So the graph's going to look different. Instead of having lots of light in June, July, and August, it's only going to have a little bit of light in June, July, and August. Where we normally see a lot of light on this day, Sydney only sees a little bit of light. Where we see a lot of darkness, that's when Sydney sees a lot of light. So anything in the southern hemisphere is going to be opposite of what we see in the northern hemisphere. And then there's Quito, Ecuador. Let's take a look at the equator. On the equator, it looks like there's the equator, and we've got right down the middle split. So on this day, we got 12 hours of daytime, 12 hours of nighttime. And 6 months later, it's going to be 12 hours of daytime, 12 hours of nighttime. If you lived on the equator, you're going to get 12 hours a day and 12 hours a night every day of the year. It's not going to change. I hope that helps you answer those 3 questions.